Somewhere along the way, they got you to believe that keeping a plant alive is complicated, that you need the special bloom formula and the separate root tonic and the gnat spray and the moisture meter that beeps. Your grandmother would have laughed at that whole wall. She kept a house full of green things, thriving on coffee grounds, a cracked teacup of water, and the spice rack. And the garden industry has spent decades and a fortune hoping you'd never figure out how little she actually needed. One honest word before we begin, because I won't dress things up the way those labels do. A few of the tricks that got passed around for years don't actually do a thing. And I'll tell you which ones flat out so you stop wasting your good scraps on them. That's a promise. Now stay with me all the way to number 1, because the last one isn't a trick at all. It's the single quiet habit that kept your grandmother's plants alive while everybody else's died. And it's the one thing they could never, ever put in a bag and sell you. Let's get our hands dirty. 39. The fan in the corner that grows you a stronger plant. Here's one nobody expects. A seedling on a windowsill grows up tall, pale, and floppy, what your grandmother called leggy, and it keels right over the first time you breathe on it. So she'd set a little fan a few feet off and let it stir the air over those babies an hour or two a day. And this is real science, not an old wives' tale. It's called thigmomorphogenesis, a $10 word for a free idea. When a stem feels the air pushing on it, the plant reads that as wind and quits racing for the ceiling. It thickens itself instead, lays down stronger fibers, grows short and stocky and tough. The breeze tricks it into building muscle. The garden catalog will sell you a plant strengthener tonic in a spray bottle for what a box fan does for nothing. 38. The chopstick that tells you the truth about watering. More houseplants are killed by kindness than by neglect, drowned, roots rotting in the dark while the worried owner keeps pouring. Your grandmother didn't guess, and she didn't buy a gadget. She'd push a plain wooden chopstick or a pencil deep into the pot, leave it a moment, and pull it out. Comes out clean and dry, the plant's thirsty. Comes out dark with damp soil clinging to it, you leave it be. The bare wood shows the moisture down where the roots actually live, not just the dry crust on top that fools everybody. They sell a moisture meter with a dial and a battery for $15 to tell you what a splinter of wood tells you for free. 37. The chopstick's other job, letting the roots breathe. Same humble stick, different rescue. Old potting soil packs down hard over the months until it's like a brick, and water just runs straight down the sides and out the bottom without ever soaking in. Your grandmother would poke that stick down through the soil in a few spots, gently, all around the pot, opening little channels. Roots need air as much as they need water. They actually breathe down there, and compacted soil suffocates them slowly. Those little holes let the air and the water back in. The shops have a whole soil aerating tool for this. It's a stick with a price tag. 36. Cinnamon, the spice that saves a whole tray of seedlings. Here's a heartbreak every seed starter knows. You've got a tray of little green sprouts coming up beautiful, and overnight they flop over at the soil line, stems gone thin and brown like somebody pinched them off. That's a fungus, and the old-timers called it damping off. Your grandmother would dust the surface of the soil with plain ground cinnamon from the spice rack, a light shake like sugar on toast, right after the seeds went in. And this one truly works. Cinnamon's got a compound called cinnamaldehyde in it that genuinely fights fungus. Researchers put it up against a whole rack of others, and it held its own. It also chases off those little fungus gnats whose maggots feed on the same mold. They sell a seed-starting fungicide with a warning label on it. She reached past it for the cinnamon. 35. The same cinnamon for tired, moldy soil. The spice rack again, so don't skip past it. When white fuzzy mold creeps across the top of a potting mix, that crusty bloom on overwatered soil, your grandmother would scrape off the worst of it and dust cinnamon over the bare spot. The same antifungal that protects the seedlings keeps that surface mold from coming back, and it does it without that chemical reek that hangs in the house for a week. The garden store would love to sell you a soil drench for this. A 50-cent jar of pie spice had it covered. 34. Coffee grounds, but the way that actually helps. Now here's where I have to be straight with you, because half of what you've heard about this is wrong. People dump wet coffee grounds straight on top of their houseplants in a thick layer, and that mats down into a moldy, water-shedding crust that does more harm than good. Your grandmother knew better. She'd let the used grounds dry out, then scratch just a thin sprinkle lightly into the top of the soil, or better yet, toss them in the compost first. Done right, they feed a little nitrogen in slowly as they break down and improve the crumb of the soil. It's the using them right that matters, not just chucking the morning pot at the poor plant. They've got bagged organic plant food on the shelf that's partly the very stuff you poured down the drain this morning. 33. The leftover tea that goes to the ferns. Same idea, a gentler cousin. The cold cup of tea left on the counter or the spent tea bag, your grandmother poured the cooled tea right onto the soil of her acid-loving plants, her ferns, and her African violets. Tea's a touch acidic and carries a whisper of nutrients, and those particular plants like their soil leaning sour. Nothing dramatic, just a small free kindness instead of pouring it away. The nursery sells acidic plant food in a jug for the plants that a cold cup of tea quietly keeps happy. 32. The coffee filter that keeps your soil where it belongs. Every gardener has done it. Watered a fresh potted plant, and watched a slug of dark soil come pouring out the drainage hole into the saucer, a muddy mess every single time. Your grandmother laid a single-used coffee filter or a scrap of newspaper over the holes in the bottom before she added soil. Water drains right through the paper, but the soil stays put, and the filter rots away harmlessly by the time it matters. There's a special mesh pot liner they'll sell you for this. She used the filter she'd already used once that morning. 31. The old sponge in the bottom of the pot. This one's clever and almost nobody does it. Drop a clean old kitchen sponge, the worn-out one you were about to throw away, in the bottom of a big pot before you fill it with soil. It does two jobs at once. It keeps the drainage hole from clogging so excess water runs free, and it holds on to a little reservoir of moisture that the roots can sip from on a hot, dry day when you've forgotten to water. A built-in safety net out of trash. They sell water-retaining crystals in a packet for this. Your grandmother kept her plants alive with the sponge that had given up on dishes. 30. Pebbles and water for the plant that's gasping for humidity. The fern that browns at every leaf tip, the orchid that sulks. Half the time it's not thirst, it's the bone-dry air in a heated house. Your grandmother would fill a shallow dish with pebbles, pour in water until it just kissed the tops of the stones, and set the pot on top so the bottom sat above the water, not in it. As that water slowly evaporated, it wrapped the plant in a little pocket of damp air, just like the muggy morning these tropical plants pine for. Meanwhile, the pot stayed up out of the wet, so the roots never rotted. They sell electric humidifiers and misters for the houseplant shelf. She made a swamp in a saucer for nothing. 29. The bathroom. Nature's greenhouse, already in your house. Here's the same humidity problem with no dish at all. Your grandmother kept her thirstiest, fussiest plants, the ferns, the ones forever crisping up, right on the bathroom windowsill. Every shower and bath filled that little room with warm steam, exactly the wet jungle air those plants evolved in, free of charge, twice a day. She let the family's own habits water the air for her. The catalog photographs its misting bottles in soft light to make you want one. A hot shower and a windowsill did the same job your whole life. 28. The plastic bag that makes a cutting take root. Trying to root a cutting or sprout a tricky seed and watching it shrivel before it ever stood a chance, your grandmother would water the little pot, then slip a clear plastic bag loosely over the top, propped up on a couple of sticks so it didn't lie against the leaves, and tuck it round the rim. That trapped the moisture and warmth in close, a tiny, steamy greenhouse on the windowsill, and the cutting hung on long enough to push out roots. She just made sure to crack it open now and then so it didn't get so stuffy that mold moved in. They sell little plastic propagation domes by the dozen now. She used the bag the bread came in. 27. Newspaper pots you plant right into the ground. Buying those flimsy plastic seedling trays year after year and tearing the roots half off when transplanting. Your grandmother wrapped a strip of newspaper around a jar to shape a little cup, folded the bottom, filled it with soil, and started her seeds in that. When the seedling was ready, the whole paper pot went straight into the ground. The newspaper rotted away, and the roots were never disturbed for a second. No transplant shock, no plastic, no cost. The garden center sells biodegradable peat pots for exactly this. Yesterday's bad news grew her tomatoes. 26. The water from boiling your eggs. Don't pour that pot down the drain. When your grandmother boiled eggs, the water pulled a little calcium out of the shells, and once it cooled, she tipped it onto her plants instead of wasting it. It's a mild thing, not a miracle, a faint mineral drink, but it cost nothing, and it would have gone down the sink anyway. The thrift was the whole point. She let the same water do two jobs before it left the house. The shops have a calcium supplement bottle for plants. She had a pot of water she'd already used. 25. Pasta and vegetable water, cooled and saved. Same lesson, bigger pot. The water you boil potatoes or vegetables in carries a little of their minerals and starch right out into the water, so your grandmother let it cool completely and poured it on the garden rather than the drain. Cooled completely, mind you, never hot, and unsalted because salt's poison to a plant. A small, free feeding hiding in a job you were already doing. They bag up plant tonics for this. She just didn't waste the water. 24. Onion skins steeped like a tea. The papery brown skins you peel off an onion and throw away without a thought. Your grandmother dropped a handful in a jar of water, let them sit a day or two, then strained it and watered her plants with the pale gold liquid. The skins give up a little potassium and a few trace minerals as they soak, a weak homemade plant tea. It's gentle, it's free, and it turned a scrap straight into something. The store sells Bloom Booster in a sachet. She made hers from the part of the onion nobody eats. 23. Crushed eggshells, but ground to dust or you're wasting them. Now listen close because this is one almost everybody gets wrong and throws away good shells over. People scatter big, crunchy half shells around a plant expecting fast calcium. And here's the truth they don't tell you. A whole or roughly crushed eggshell can sit in the soil for years. Archaeologists dig them up intact from centuries ago. It barely breaks down in your lifetime. The trick your grandmother knew was to dry the shells and crush them to a near powder, fine as flour, before working them in. Only then is there enough surface for the soil to actually free up the calcium. Ground fine, they slowly help. Left in chunks, they're just decoration. The fineness is the whole secret, and it's the part the pretty internet pictures always skip. 22. Wiping the dust off the leaves. This sounds too simple to matter, and that's exactly why people skip it and lose plants. A houseplant's leaves are how it breathes and eats the light, and a film of household dust is like a curtain drawn over a window. The plant slowly starves for sun in its own living room. Your grandmother wiped each big leaf, top and bottom, with a soft, damp cloth every so often, and the plant perked right up because it could finally see. It also knocked off the first scouts of any pest before they settled in. They sell leaf shine spray in a can. A damp rag and 2 minutes did it better and left the pores open to breathe. 21. Why you should never use that leaf shine spray. Here's the reversal on that very can, and it's worth the minute. Those glossy leaf shine products coat the leaf in a film to make it gleam for the camera, but a leaf isn't supposed to be sealed. It breathes through tiny pores, and it takes in and lets off air across its whole surface. Glue a shine over that, and you can actually clog those pores and smother the leaf you were trying to pamper. The plant looks polished and slowly suffocates. Your grandmother's plain damp cloth lifted the dust and left the leaf to do its breathing. The shiniest leaf in the room isn't always the healthiest one. Sometimes it's just the one that's been varnished. 20. The pantyhose that ties up a plant without cutting it. A leggy plant or a heavy tomato vine flops, and you reach for wire or twine, which over the weeks bites a groove right into the swelling stem and strangles it. Your grandmother cut an old run of pantyhose into soft, stretchy strips and used those to tie her plants to a stake. The nylon is soft and it gives. It stretches as the stem fattens up, so it supports without ever choking. The garden store sells soft plant ties in a coil. She got hers from the stocking with the hole in the toe. 19. Insulating the pots when the cold creeps in. People forget that a plant in a pot has its roots far more exposed to the cold than one in the ground. A thin wall of clay and then the chill, and roots are the tender part. On a cold snap, your grandmother would pull an old wool sock or a wrap of newspaper around the base of the pot, a little blanket for the roots while the top of the plant fended for itself. Wool especially holds warmth and steadies the temperature so the roots don't get shocked. They sell pot covers and frost jackets now. She used the sock that lost its match in the wash. 18. A wedge of potato to start a hard cutting. This one looks like a magic trick. Take a firm rose cutting or a tricky stem, poke a hole in a raw potato, push the cutting in, and plant the whole potato with the stem sticking up. The potato stays moist and starchy down in the soil, and it keeps the bottom of that cutting from drying out or rotting while it works up the nerve to grow roots. A built-in, damp, nourishing cradle. It doesn't work every time, but it costs you one potato to try. The shops sell rooting gel in a tube. Your grandmother kept hers in the bottom of the vegetable bin. 17. The fish tank water nobody should pour down the drain. If there's an aquarium in the house, the water you siphon out at cleaning time is the best free fertilizer going, and people flush it. All that fish waste has loaded it with nitrogen and minerals, the exact things plants are hungry for, already dissolved and ready. Your grandmother, or any thrifty soul with a tank, poured that old tank water straight onto the houseplants instead of the sink. The fish made the fertilizer, she just carried the bucket. They sell fish emulsion fertilizer in a bottle, and it smells like it sounds. The free version was already in the tank. 16. Crushed charcoal to keep a closed garden sweet. For a terrarium or any pot that holds water and goes stale and sour, your grandmother put down a thin layer of plain hardwood charcoal in the bottom, the kind from a clean wood fire, not the chemical briquettes. Charcoal is riddled with microscopic pores. It grabs hold of odors and impurities and keeps the trapped water from turning foul, the same reason it's used to filter water. A little layer kept a closed glass garden fresh for months. The garden shop sells bagged horticultural charcoal for this exact job. A few lumps from the bottom of the grate did it for nothing. 15. The fan again, but now for the mold and the gnats. We talked about the fan growing sturdier stems. Here's its second gift, and it's the one that saves a sickly plant. Stagnant, still air around a crowded windowsill is a breeding ground. Mold blooms on the soil, fungus gnats hover in clouds, mildew creeps over the leaves. A little moving air dries the soil surface and the leaves just enough that none of those things can get a grip. Your grandmother's plants sat where the air stirred, and they stayed clean for it. They sell gnat sprays and mildew sprays, a separate bottle for each. A breeze across the room beat them both at once. 14. Vinegar for the ants marching to your pots. When ants started filing along the windowsill and into the plants, your grandmother mixed plain white vinegar with an equal splash of water and wiped it along their trail, the sill, the rim, the path they marched. Ants navigate by a scent trail they lay down for each other, and the sharp vinegar wipes that invisible road clean off, so the line breaks up and they lose their way. It's a deterrent that erases their map, not a poison. They sell ant sprays for the houseplant shelf with warnings about keeping it off the food counter. She used the same vinegar she cleaned the windows with. Careful to wipe the trail, not soak the plant, since vinegar's hard on leaves and roots. 13. The humble pencil shaving as a top dressing. Sharpen a wooden pencil and you've got a little pile of curled shavings. Your grandmother scattered a thin layer over the soil of her pots. They're just wood, so as they slowly break down, they add a crumb of organic matter. And in the meantime, that loose layer on top slows the soil from drying out so fast between waterings. A tiny thing from a tiny chore. They sell bags of decorative mulch for the tops of houseplants. She had a pencil sharpener and a free afternoon. 12. Letting the dead stalks become mulch. When the summer's plants died back, most folks bagged up the dead stalks and dry stems and set them at the curb. Your grandmother broke them up and laid them back over the soil as a mulch. That dead matter shades the ground so it holds its moisture, keeps the soil temperature even, smothers the weed seeds trying to sprout, and slowly rots down to feed next year's growth. The garden does its own composting right where it stands. The store sells bags of mulch hauled in by truck. She let the garden mulch itself. 11. A pinch of Epsom salt for the yellowing leaves, and only then. Here's one that's true but oversold, so let me give it to you straight. If a plant's older leaves go yellow between the veins while the veins stay green, that can be a magnesium shortage, and Epsom salt is magnesium. A teaspoon dissolved in a quart of water, watered in now and then, can green those leaves back up. But, and this is the part the bloggers skip, it only helps if magnesium was actually what was missing. Most soil isn't short on it, and dumping Epsom salt on a healthy plant does nothing but throw the soil out of balance. It's a fix for one specific problem, not a tonic for everything. They sell it to you as a miracle for every plant in the house. Your grandmother used it the way you'd use medicine, for the symptom, not by the spoonful on everything. 10. The wooden skewer that props a leaning plant. A top-heavy plant tipping its pot, or a single stem flopping while the rest stands fine. Your grandmother slid a plain wooden kebab skewer or a chopstick into the soil and loosely tied the wandering stem to it with a strip of that soft pantyhose. An invisible little splint, straightening the plant while it found its feet, then pulled out once the stem stiffened up. They sell green plastic plant steaks in a bundle. She had a skewer left over from supper. 9. Letting the watering can sit out overnight. This one's quiet but real. Cold tap water straight from the faucet shocks warm roots, and the chlorine they put in it doesn't do the soil any favors either. Your grandmother filled her watering can and let it stand out overnight before she used it. The chlorine smell gases off into the air, and the water comes up to room temperature, so the plant gets a gentle drink instead of a cold slap. A free overnight wait, and the water was kinder. They sell water conditioner in a dropper bottle. She just filled the can the night before. 8. Reusing the rinse water from the kitchen. When your grandmother rinsed out a milk jug or swished a glass that had held something harmless, she didn't tip that cloudy rinse down the drain. Onto a houseplant it went. A faint trace of nutrients, sure, but mostly it was the principle of the thing. Water passed through one job before it left the house, and the plants drank what the sink would have swallowed. A whole life run on not wasting. They never did make a bottle for thrift. That was always free. 7. Knowing when a plant wants a smaller pot, not a bigger one. Everybody's instinct when a plant struggles is to move it to a grander pot, and your grandmother knew that often drowns it. A little plant in a big pot sits in a huge volume of wet soil its small roots can't drink up fast enough, and all that standing dampness rots it from below. She kept her plants in pots only a touch bigger than their roots, so the soil dried at the right pace and the roots stayed sweet. The shop is delighted to sell you a bigger pot and more soil. The right answer was often the smaller one you already had. 6. The clay pot that breathes on its own. There's a reason your grandmother favored the plain terracotta pot over the glazed and the plastic. Unglazed clay is porous. It actually breathes, letting water seep slowly through its walls and air reach the soil, so the roots are far less likely to sit and rot. The plant in plain clay forgives an overwatering that would kill the same plant in sealed plastic. The fancy glazed pots are prettier and the plastic's cheaper, and both hold water against the roots. She picked the humble brown pot that let the soil breathe and paid less for it. 5. The penny in the pot and why you can stop bothering. Now here's a famous one, and I'm going to do you the favor of killing it. For generations, people dropped a copper penny in the pot, swearing the copper would fight off mold and feed the plant, because copper truly is antifungal. Sounds clever. Here's the trouble. That solid little coin barely gives up any copper at all sitting in plain soil. It just sits there, shiny, doing nothing. And worse, every penny made in this country since 1982 is mostly zinc with only a thin copper skin. So there's hardly any copper there to begin with. The whole trick quietly stopped working the year they changed what a penny's made of, and nobody updated the story. So save your pennies. That's one piece of grandmother's wisdom that the facts simply don't back up. And I'd rather tell you than let you keep doing it. 4. The banana peel water everybody swears by, and it barely works. This'll sting a little because it's all over the place right now. People soak a banana peel in a jar of water for a few days and pour that banana tea on their plants, certain they're feeding them potassium. The hard truth? The potassium mostly stays locked in the peel. A quick soak in cold water barely pulls any out, and what little leaches into the water isn't in a form the plant can easily take up. On top of that, the sugary water draws fungus gnats and grows mold. If you want the good out of a banana peel, it has to be composted, actually broken down by the bugs and microbes before a plant can use a thing in it. The jar of brown water on your counter is mostly just feeding gnats. I'd rather you knew than keep brewing it. 3. Milk on the leaves, a little truth wrapped in a lot of myth. You'll hear that wiping leaves with milk makes them shine and feeds them. The shine part's just the film, nothing magic. But there's one real thread worth keeping. A diluted milk spray has shown some genuine effect against powdery mildew, that white, dusty coating on leaves. Something in the milk reacts in sunlight to knock the fungus back. So watered down, in the light, for mildew, it's got a real basis. As a leaf food or a daily shine, though, it's mostly just souring on the leaf and going rancid in the room. Keep the one true use, skip the rest. Your grandmother didn't waste good milk polishing what a damp rag cleaned for free. 2. The ice cubes for slow watering, true, with one sharp warning. Setting a few ice cubes on the soil to melt slow and water a plant without flooding it, that part's real, and a study on orchids found the cold never even reached a level that hurt the roots. The soil warmed right back up within a few hours. It's a tidy way to keep from overwatering. But here's the warning the cute videos leave off. Never, ever let that ice touch the leaves or the stem. Ice against living leaf tissue damages it fast. The cold kills the cells right where it sits, and you'll get an ugly brown patch. On the soil, away from the plant, it's fine. On the leaves, you'll wound the very thing you're feeding. Set the cube on the dirt, not on the plant, and pour off any cold water left standing in the saucer. And now, number 1. The cheapest thing on this whole list, and the one thing they could never bottle, bag, or barcode. It isn't a scrap or a spice or a trick at all. It's this. Your grandmother paid attention. She'd stop at the windowsill on her way past, push a finger in the soil, turn a leaf to the light, and just look. And because she looked, she caught the thirst before it wilted, the rot before it spread, the first gnat before it was a cloud. Every single bottle and bag and beeping gadget up on that garden center wall is selling you one thing dressed up 100 ways, a replacement for paying attention. The moisture meter replaces your finger. The plant food replaces your noticing the leaves go pale. The fungicide replaces you catching the mildew on day 1. And that's the whole game they ran. They took the one free thing that kept plants alive, your own 2 eyes and a minute of care, and convinced you it wasn't enough, that you had to buy your way to a green thumb. You never did. Your grandmother grew a windowsill full of green on coffee grounds, a cracked teacup, and the habit of looking, and not one bit of it ever had a price tag. So before you drive to the garden center, go stand at your own windowsill and just look at your plants for a minute. That minute is the secret. It always was. If even one of these saved you a trip down that aisle, do me the small kindness of tapping that like button. It costs you nothing, same as the trick, and it's the only reason the next person ever hears any of this instead of the commercial. Subscribe and stay close, because I've got a whole cupboard and a whole garden's worth of this left, and I'm nowhere near done. I'll see you in the next one. Now go look at your plants.